my entire adult life preparing as a professional, as what is known as an industrial organizational psychologist. I like the title because it sounds smarter than I am, but I've spent my entire career doing that, deepening my understanding of the best psychology has to offer us about work, leaders, and organizing. I spent 25 years preparing graduate students to do the same. And I will tell you that that work is important. The research that we have done, that colleagues of ours have done, is important. It has affected the way all kinds of things go in organizations deeply in practice. But I will also say this, it is a vehicle that is always touching something deeper. You cannot get into psychology. You can actually do psychology without touching those deeper spaces, but it's always there. We have all the resources you need to understand the fundamentals. I want to say this too, to those of you who are new to the conversation, that we do have all the resources in Wild, even just for us, but we could send you to other resources regarding motivation, organizational structure, you name it, performance. We have those kinds of resources. We can send you those things, but I will tell you this, that today is going to be a little bit of a different conversation. The topic is on how do we motivate people and what executives are talking about regarding that. So it is going to be different. And if you are new, welcome. I think there are some new faces here. If you're someone who is considering working with Wild Leaders, welcome. And I will tell you this also, I'm just going to warn you, I hope you won't be scared off today for the wrong reasons. So hang in there. I need a little bit of grace today because I'm navigating an interesting week. And so I need that as we walk into this content. And I promise you, I will finish and I will connect the depth of what's going on inside of me with the nuts and bolts of what it means to develop leaders and to motivate people and the people around you. I do promise you that. But I also want to warn some of you that it's been a tough and amazing week for me, which I'll explain in a moment. So I need that grace. And if you're uncomfortable, honestly, if you are uncomfortable, I got to tell you some of this just to tell you, if you are uncomfortable with a conversation that is going to go a bit deeper than simple motivation and leadership fundamentals, or if you are really uncomfortable with a talk about life and death, for whatever reason, I mean this, it's okay if you're not in a position to stay today. But I do promise you that I will handle it as responsibly as I possibly can, and I will leave you with hope. And some of you are thinking, what the heck is he going to say? So I don't even know if it'll be that grand, but let's get started. So I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the Wild Conversation. And our goal here, our goal is to make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And today, the conversation is about motivating your people. And ultimately, I will finish there, as I said, but my family has had a tough week, and I'd like to share some of that with you. And I've already mentioned that I need your patience. You're going to just offer me grace as I go through this, because I'm going to share some personal things about how I see the world, in hopes that you might do the same. Not necessarily exactly the same way I do, but that you might reflect on those things. And I also need you to understand that, like you, I do have a belief system that I believe is true, that I have faith in, that may be different from yours, and I'm okay with that. But I would also share that I don't think we're all right in what we believe. But I will tell you, and I'll tell you this, I hope I'm right. And there's all kinds of reasons I would tell you that too. And what we believe is impacting how we're working, leading, learning, and everything we do. It matters. I see some of you nodding. It matters. So I just hope you won't feel alienated, but you'll feel invited. And the only people that might hate what I'm about to say is the fundamentalist. And what I mean by that is any person who believes their answer is the right one, and that's the end of it. Because my worldview is built on the fundamental principle of grace, that I need a lot of it, and that you need a lot of it just to get through this life. So after the Wild Conversation last week, I got a call from my sister. I didn't think I'd get emotional. And when you've had a week like this, and Mark, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I told my family, like, I don't know what happens in your eyes, what your eyes sound like when there are no more tears. Like, do they make little squirting sounds like your car does when you run out of windshield wiper fluid? But I got a call from my sister, and my nephew Marshall um had overdosed. And he's 38 years old. And I'm not going to get into his whole story, but this was right after I was with many of you. And I'm just going to oversimplify things that some of you know more about than I do, but it was not who he was. And it's not who he is. It's something he struggles with. And these moments, they call out something deeper in us. They root us to our core and surface whether or not we were ever rooted in the first place. And I was thinking about that moment my sister called, and going forward into the weekend Friday, because my nephew Marshall was found not breathing, and was worked on. CPR was done on him for 20 minutes, and they were able to revive him. So at the moment that I went to the hospital Friday, he was there. And I went through the weekend not knowing what brain functioning looked like for him. And Marshall was doing well. He had been clean for, I think, 70 days. And he was doing well. And if you ask anybody who understands addiction, and they would say, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that he had been clean for 70 days. I had wonderful conversations with him over Christmas, and he was as whole as I had ever experienced him. So just awesome conversation. I had a chance to be with him and pray with him and do all, just I've been close to him, but it was closer. And so that's what happened. And I will finish that. I'll tell you the rest of that story in a moment. But it was also interesting. This comes on the heels of also what we saw. Some of you are familiar with what happened with Damar Hamlin. And that moment when he went down on the football field, and everything changed. What we witnessed was one of the most powerful 30 minutes ever on Monday Night Football or on television. And if you saw it, or if you get a chance to go see it, as the commentators were confronted with the possibility that they had just witnessed an actual death on national television on Monday Night Football. And later we saw a prayer in front of a national audience on ESPN. Like, these things don't happen. And it doesn't happen until we're confronted with the deepest questions of our humanity. And as my friend Brian McCormick asked last week, he said, what are we forced to recognize when confronted with the reality of death? And he said, the first thing is this: our physical lives are not infinite. We are all going to die. I don't know about y'all, but last I checked, the mortality rate was still hovering about 100%. We're all going to die and leave behind these physical bodies. That public mourning, this is an interesting statement, that public mourning robs us of the illusion we grasp onto that we, and maybe more importantly, our loved ones, are not going to die. We're robbed of that illusion. And the second thing is that we're powerless to change this for ourselves. And the questions of what matters, of who matters, what do I believe, what is my faith in, all come to the surface of our answers. All those things become, and our answers become so salient, like our struggle with those things. And I still promise we're going to come back to motivation. There is a reason in my madness right now. My sister sent me a text last Monday, and she said this: I don't know where Marshall is. As my nephew is laying there in bed on a ventilator. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And I loved it that she said it, because I asked myself the same thing. And I was confronted with something I believe in and I cling to, and that deeper belief. And I just hope this is okay, y'all. I don't know if it's okay to talk about God. And I'm okay if you don't believe the same things. I got to just yell that out. I don't know. Please know that from my heart. I think you probably can sense that, but I'm just telling you where I land. And my deep belief is that Marshall was and is with God. I told my sister that, and later I called a friend of mine who has been a peer mentor in my life for almost 30 years. And when I told him that, and by the way, he did his PhD on addiction and recovery, and so he knows things I don't know. And when I told him what she said, he said the same thing. I don't know where Marshall is, Rob, but I know he is with God. And in my belief system, he is with Jesus. And there's passage, if some of you are uncomfortable with spiritual documents, there is a passage in the book of Psalms in the Bible, in Psalm 139, and it talks about this, and it says, and I just took so much comfort in this because I don't know where he is, but it says that God's presence is always there, and that when we rise up to the heavens, that he is there, and when we go to the depths of hell, he is there. And so that's what I told my sister. I mean, my hope is that none of you are turned off by my vulnerability. I don't really care about that. Maybe I'm just saying that it's my little, but I'm okay. I wrote, if I'm okay if you are, and it's some of you may know I come from a Christian worldview, or if you come from that worldview like me, might not like what I said because you want to say he's in heaven. And some of you have had a bad experience in the church or work in an organization where the word Christian, or you feel that way, has become a dirty word. And if so, I am so sorry if in any way I've contributed to that. But I believe that Marshall, all I can say is I believe that Marshall is in the arms of a loving God who does not simply accept him, but forgives him and sees him. And what's the question I have for is, what is your belief system that is the true driver and force behind your attempts to develop and change yourself, or to develop other leaders and people around you? Is it that every person is a good person and that's the whole story? Is it that the people you like are good people? Is it that you are unredeemable? Is it that others are unredeemable? Is it that you are not worthy of forgiveness or of being loved? Is it that people don't have an agency to choose? Is it that leaders are the culpable ones, and we should only blame them? Or is it that thinking about your belief system is too much work and not appropriate in organizational context, so just get on with it? I have friends like that. And I'm not dismissing them. In my own belief system, I believe that every human being in whom we have a chance to invest is a beloved child of God, but a child of God who needs forgiveness. Because how do I know that? Because I know I do. And if I'm the only one, I am in deep doo-doo, people. I'm just saying, like, I understand myself well enough to know that I need, there has to be that reality. And it's interesting because according to Aristotle, some of this is a quote we hear. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." We see this quote all over the place. Is this true? We like it if we are doing good things, but we're repulsed by it if we're doing horrible things. We have a twisted way in our culture of grabbing onto philosophies that work when they work in our favor. But I'm not saying Aristotle was all wrong, but I'm like, there's more to the story than that, right? Because if I am what I do, then what am I? And when it comes to motivation and motivating our people, what in the world does all this have to do with that? And I could talk to you at length, by the way, maybe at some point we will. We have resources for you, as I said, about the power of implementing the principle of expectancy theory in your managers, helping them understand all kinds of things regarding that theory that has changed the way we think about motivation. I could talk with you at length about the importance of understanding fundamentals of goal setting or basic behaviorism in organizations. I could even talk with you about a deeper sense of purpose behind your goals. Daniel and I could do that until you're just not wanting to hear anymore. And those things are important. They are. Those fundamentals are important. But let me ask you this. Are we interested in simple motivations to do tasks today or this year? Or are we interested in motivating people from their core, from the center of who they are? Are we interested in understanding our own motivations in a way that even now, until we begin asking deeper questions, we won't fully understand? This last week, I was working on an article because we were trying to describe to the leaders we work with how long it takes to develop leaders. And we called it, "There are no shortcuts to lasting change." And I went through all these things that we see happening that change when people use the processes we provide, like alignment increases, learning and accountability increase, team cohesion increases, culture changes, performance changes. All those things matter. They matter. But are they the main point? Are they the main point? I asked a leader this last week that we work with, I said, why did you start working with us? Why did you choose to invest in leaders? You know what he said? He said, when we started, I did it because I knew I had to develop leader capacity in my organization. I knew you could do that. And I wanted to retire in 2 years. And he said, it's changed. Now I realized, this is what he said. I'm just going to tell you what he said. He said, I want a spirit of shalom for my people. And if you don't know what shalom means, go look it up. I want that. And I want it worse for them than I want it for myself. And I will tell you that the Wild Toolkit and everything we do, I've been asking myself this. I ask myself this all the time. Does developing leader capacity with the best psychology in the world, does it make a difference? It does. But I ask myself, what is the connection to these things that I know matter at a much deeper level? And I would say that for us, what I realized this last week is developing leader capacity is a vehicle. It's an important vehicle, but it's not the main point. It is a vehicle, but it's not the main point. It's like the greatest bait and switch in history. Like, we know that we're going to develop leader capacity, but something deeper is going to happen in the people in your organization. And it's been a tough week. Yesterday, we gathered for what's called the Heroes Walk. And so Marshall's brain was gone. And I think Claire has a picture of Marshall. And so we walked. I didn't know how this happens, but most of his body was viable for donation. And so we were walking him to oh, there he is. Probably 50 people gathered, and then on top of that, all the staff from the hospital, they gather when a person has donated their body, because his body was about we walked him all the way to the OR, and then his body's going to go all over the country. That, like, even his heart, we found out yesterday, is going to someone. So our family got to walk. After that whole group of people saw him come out of his room in the ICU, we got to walk him all the way to his hospital room and pray as a family with him at that last moment. And it was just an incredible experience. And the letters that have poured out, like, I saw a letter yesterday from a friend of his from college who says, Marshall, I didn't know this guy. And Marshall changed my whole life, changed my whole college career. And I know, Mark, as I'm looking at your face, you heard all these stories, and you heard stories, and you knew Marshall. And it's like these people whose I didn't know about, somebody else might look at my nephew as an addict, and I look at him as a human being, right? Who changed people's lives. And it calls us back to this thing, like, what is your vehicle and what is the point? What is your vehicle and what is the point? And I return to the Damar Hamlin story, and I'm going a little bit longer today, but in the Damar Hamlin story, I heard Dan Avlovsky say on ESPN, he said this, it was powerful. Dan said, football gave me everything. And then he said how secondary football is in this moment. This isn't about a football player. This is about a human being, is what he said on national television. And I'm going to trust you all to tie this together for yourselves, because the inspiration for me was like, this was an incredibly difficult week for my family, for my dad in 93 to watch one of his grandchildren pass on. Was incredible just to see that. But it just this profound, like, this thing we don't talk about is that our work is a vehicle, but it's not the main point. And our work is always doing something deeper. The people that you all have a chance to invest in as leaders, that it's incredible. And what if motivation matters in the short term, but what would change if people were motivated for a lifetime? What would we study then? What would we do then? And if our work is a vehicle, but it's not the main point, and our work is always doing something deeper, if it's not, maybe you're in the wrong car. I don't know what to do with that. It's just what came to me. So what I would invite us to today, and I hope that all lands somewhere important with you. What is your vehicle? And what's the main point?